Okay. Very good. Morning again, Jay. Good morning, everybody. It is Thursday, June 30th, 2022. Where did June go? It's the Housing and Redevelopment Authority meeting for the City of Edina. And before we get started, I want to let folks know that it might be listening in the virtual world that you'll have one opportunity to call in this morning, and that is during community comment. And you can speak about anything that's not on the agenda this morning or scheduled for a future public hearing before the HRA. If you want to call in during community comment, here's the number on the screen, 800-374-0221, conference ID 797063. Press star 1 to speak to the person that'll get you then in contact with Director Benarat, who will bring you in to speak to the HRA. And that'll come up fairly quickly in the agenda. There are no public hearings this morning, and so there will be just that one opportunity to visit with the HRA commissioners, and that is during community comment. So having provided that information, I'll call the meeting to order and ask our administrative support specialist, Liz Olson, to call the roll.
Commissioner Jackson. Here. Commissioner Anderson.
Here.
Commissioner Pierce.
Here.
Chair Hovland.
Here. And next is the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We have a meeting agenda that's been published as required. And is there anyone who wishes to modify the agenda in any form? Our Executive Director, you're good with the agenda as is? All right, very good. Is there a motion to adopt the agenda? Meeting agenda is published.
So moved.
Commissioner Jackson moves.
Second.
Commissioner Pierce seconds the adoption of the meeting agenda. Any further discussion? All those in favor of approving the meeting agenda as published, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Carried. And now we are on to community comment. Again, folks, that number, if you want to call in, it's on your screen. This is a little bit different number than I got in the script. I don't know if you noticed that. So I'm assuming the one on the screen is correct. I've got an 888-504-7949 number.
The 888 number is correct.
All right, so, okay. So if you want to call in for community comment, here's the number, 888-504-7949, 888-504-7949, and the participant passcode is 797063. 797063. Sorry for the confusion. That there you go. Now we got the right number up on the screen. If you want to speak to the operators, press star 1, and then Director Benarat will be observing the screen if you want to call in. So it is time now for community comment. Is there anyone in the audience who wishes to speak to the HRA on a matter of concern to them? All right, seeing no one coming forward, let's go to the folks that might be listening in electronically. Do we have anything there?
Good morning, Chair Hovland, members of the Commission. I do not yet have anyone dialing in. Because there is a short delay with the broadcast, though, I would recommend that we wait a minute before moving on, giving people time to call in. My clock shows that it's 7:38, so I will come back to you at 7:39 or when I have a caller, whichever is first.
Okay, thank you.
All right, my clock shows it's 7:39, and my operator assures me no one's trying to get in, so I think it's safe for you to move forward with the agenda.
Very good. Thank you, Director Benarott. Typically, following committee comment, we'll have our executive director's response to committee comments from the prior meeting. I'm showing that there are no comments to be responsive to, and I just want to get an affirmation from you on that.
That's correct, Mr. Chair. There were no comments at the previous meeting.
Okay, thank you. Next is the consent agenda. There's several items on the consent agenda. Are there any commissioners who would like to remove an item from the consent agenda?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Anderson?
Yes, 6D.
D?
D, yes, sir.
All right. Anyone else? All right, with the exception of 6D, as in dog, is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Commissioner
Second.
Jackson moves, Commissioner Anderson seconds the adoption of the consent agenda with the exception of item 6D, which we're going to handle on an individual basis. Any further discussion? All those in favor of adopting the items on the consent agenda with the exception of 6D, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Carried. Then let's go to 6D, which is Resolution 2022-08, dealing with parcels that are occupied by structurally substandard buildings. And it looks like our manager, Neuendorf, is going to handle this.
Yes, good morning. Thank you. Commissioner Anderson had asked for some additional information about this item. This pertains to two buildings at 7200 and 7250 France Avenue. They're two vacant office and medical office buildings. They're shown in red on this map. They're on the west side of the street, right across from the Lunds and Byerly's and the Macy's Furniture Gallery. The two parcels are about 5 acres in size combined. It's an interesting site. It's been the subject of much conversation over the last several years. One of the challenges of the site is that they're low-lying, so they collect the stormwater for not just their own properties, but most of the neighbors' properties as well. That's one of the things that makes them unique. But the buildings are in poor shape. We had them inspected back in 2019 as we considered a different project. We had them inspected for TIF compliance, whether or not they'd be considered blighted or substandard. And back at that time, they were considered blighted or substandard, and the buildings have only gotten worse and more vacant over the last couple years. So this is the 7200 building. It is vacant, it is boarded up and mostly secure. The adjacent building, the 7250, was formerly a medical office. This one has a shakier past. It was considered structurally unsound by our building department a few years ago, and it was declared not safe for occupancy. And so since that time, it's been boarded up, it's been made secure, but just with the day-to-day life, the security doesn't always take place. So while there is a fence around it, sometimes the fence gets taken down, snuck into, et cetera, so that building is in poor condition. We do expect a development proposal to come in soon for this project. We know that the previous project was not able to get financing and did not go forward, will not go forward. There is a new ownership group that intends to present something, but still the building's in poor condition. The reason we brought this resolution before the HRA this morning was to declare and confirm that it's still considered blighted or substandard. That doesn't guarantee or commit to using TIF, but it creates an option. And we think this is a prudent option because it's more important that the building come down sooner than later. So by recognizing and approving this resolution this morning, we could demolish the building early and still consider TIF for up to 3 years in the future. Again, no commitment to using TIF, but we think it's a prudent option to at least have part of the conversation. And I think most importantly, we want to get the buildings cleaned up and taken down sooner than later. So that's the background of the resolution. I'm happy to be here for any questions.
Not necessarily a question, Mr. Chair, just I just want to confirm Mr. Neuendorf's comments, and just also, it doesn't really fall within the jurisdiction of the HRA to talk about safety at that building. However, it's rapidly turning into an attractive nuisance. We know that there's trespassing. I've seen some other pictures that have been sent me recently at other elevations around the building. It's embarrassing. And so I'm going to suggest that we take this up at our next council meeting and move forward on demolition of the building. Doesn't necessarily need to be a condemnation. I think that new ownership can make a decision to take that down, and there's some leeway, as Mr. Neundorf suggests, in doing so. I understand we've seen a proposal also on that site earlier. I'm certain that there's something coming in relatively short order. At the same time, we don't know what the future brings. We don't know what role interest rates are going to play, or supply chain issues that may come up, or approval on a project. That building needs to go away. So I'm just going to make that suggestion, something we can consider in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Yeah, I think the purpose of this, as I understand it, this resolution would be to affirm the decision we made in 2019 that they were structurally substandard. And as Commissioner Anderson appropriately points out, they're in much worse condition now than they were back in 2019 when that decision was made. Commissioner Anderson, would you care to move that matter?
So moved, Mr. Chair.
All right. Commissioner Anderson moves the adoption of Resolution 2022-08, finding that the parcels described are occupied by structurally substandard buildings. Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Jackson. Any further discussion? All those in favor of adopting Resolution 2022-08, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. And now we will move on to the next portion of the agenda, which is the reports and recommendations. We've got a couple of matters there that we want to visit with folks about. And one is a pilot program with LISC as a potential partner. And this is a single-family preservation program. And Stephanie Hawkinson, our Affordable Housing Development Manager, will give the presentation. And we have several folks with us this morning. It's nice to see folks again after a couple of years of COVID. And so thanks for being with us. Gretchen Nichols with LISC, and then Brenda Lano-Wolke with from Homes Within Reach. So now I'll turn to Manager Hawkinson for her presentation. Good morning, Manager Hawkinson.
Good morning, Commissioners. As you said, I want to introduce a new pilot program, and this is designed to bring more developers of affordable single-family homes into Edina. The objective of this program is to create more affordable ownership opportunities and to preserve the remaining, or some of the remaining, moderately priced homes that are currently in the city. And the parameters in which this is being proposed are my 2021 and 2022 work plan, excuse the typo. In the work plan, I'm to review the process of using our trust funds received by the buy-in option to develop a policy to ensure funds are used with a race and equity lens. And then the comprehensive plan says equal access and opportunities for all residents and fostering economic equity. And the race and equity report says perceptions exist that city-based housing programs and policies are contributing to the lack of people of color in Edina. So those are the parameters in which I'm working. Before describing the program, I want to provide some context in which this was designed. This slide contains quotes of information published from Minnesota Housing Partnership, Minnesota Housing, and the Federal Reserve Bank of Minneapolis. There have been a lot of attention paid these past few years on the housing disparities between white and BIPOC homeowners. Minnesota ranks one of the worst in the nation for these disparities. Research has delved into why this has occurred. Reasons range from historic lending practices, redlining, deed restrictions, the lack of generational wealth, building opportunities, etc. One variable that exacerbates housing disparities is the rising cost of housing. Although we cannot have a race-based housing program, we can help address this gap by preserving some of our more affordable housing stock. I acknowledge that race and income are not the same thing, but there is an overlap in the Venn diagram. Furthermore, income-based programs does not enter into the realm of protected class. The Federal Reserve Bank took a deeper dive into housing disparities in Minnesota. As you see, homeownership rates among white households is just shy of 80%, whereas for black households, it's roughly 25%. Some may argue this is based on qualifications such as credit scores and income. However, when adjusting for socioeconomic and demographic factors, that only explains part of the story. Compared with white households, a large portion of disparity gap cannot be explained by socioeconomic factors, as you can see by the gold portion of the bar graph on the right. That is to say that housing disparities are complex and cannot be explained by income alone. In Edina, we have lost roughly 1,000 modest-priced single-family homes to tear-downs and rebuilds. There are community-wide debates on whether this is a good thing or a bad thing. I mean, some are really supportive of this, where some are calling for some preservation. And the Quality of Life Survey does indicate that residents are concerned about housing affordability. The average price of a teardown in recent years was in the mid-400s, whereas the average price of a rebuild is about $1.3 million. There is no question that Edina is a prime location for these teardowns and luxury rebuilds. We have no shortage of developers of single-family homes who want to work here. We have polled the top permit holders of single-family homes in the city that are listed here. These are familiar, well-established, and highly regarded companies. Developers' earnings on potentially increases the larger the house is. The profit margin is much smaller on a small, affordable home. That is why they are not naturally occurring in the marketplace. In looking at the developer world, the Greater Minnesota Housing Fund and others have concluded that the affordable housing developers of color are underrepresented and may lack access to capital and business relationships within the industry. I threw a lot at you in that short period of time, and I want to summarize before delving into the structure of the pilot program. There are larger societal issues regarding housing disparities and small developer access to capital. There's the context of escalating housing prices. Locally, we have lost 1,000 of our modest homes that have been diverted to large luxury homes. This trend is continuing, and the demand is there for this. However, modest homeowners are priced out of the market. The average house value in 2022, this is the average, is well over $750,000 in Edina. This trend is most likely to continue and could continue well until all of the modest homes are gone. To help create some diversity in the housing market, to preserve some of the modest homes, government does have a role. As is being demonstrated with our partnership with Homes Within Reach, the city can help the preservation of affordable housing and assure its affordability for 99 years. Government can also help emerging developers gain access to capital so they can work and it needed to preserve these smaller homes for new homeowners. With government assistance, we have made some progress in preserving modest-priced homes. In contrast to the 1,053 houses that have been torn down and replaced with luxury homes, we have preserved 7 from the landfill thus far in this past year. We sent out postcards to all our homeowners with houses assessed up to $425,000, giving potential sellers an option, it's their option, to preserve their home. As of Monday, 48 homeowners have called interested in this program. Yet Homes Within Reach has only 3 staff members, and they work in 14 communities. So the capacity is limited. Even so, the need for affordable housing is increasing. So this is just to talk about Homes Within Reach and what they have done thus far. The pilot program for which I'm seeking approval today is to address the capacity issue of Homes Within Reach, increase the capacity of new emerging developers, and preserve our modest housing stock. One of the ways to address the need for affordable single-family houses to help grease the wheels for smaller developers, to help them build business relationships and gain access to capital. There are multiple programs to help increase the capacity of emerging developers, as listed in the box on the right. But few, if any, of these programs provide the financing to get the project over the finish line and into homeowners' hands. These help with training, with learning how to do scopes, with trying to build relationships, but none actually help with the houses themselves and the projects that are on the ground. The definition of emerging in the context for this pilot program aligns with Hennepin and Ramsey County CERT program for small developers to provide a platform for firms not dominant in their industry and are emerging in the local marketplace. Emerging is defined in accordance to size and gross receipts. So, as I said, we're trying to address the capacity of homes within reach. The obstacles are loss of modest homes, lack of incentive of experienced developers and contractors to work on modest homes. So the same shortage of developers to do that because what their earnings are smaller, the smaller the home. Limited capacity of homes within reach and their contractors. So I want to enhance the program in order to increase the capacity of homes within reach, bring more developers into the fold of these smaller, modest homes. So similar is preserve home ownership for low and moderate income homeowners, increases the capacity, retains community and homeowner wealth, enhances residential stability, preserves long-term housing affordability, and serves households with incomes at 60 to 80% of area median income. And those are the income ranges that WALT serves, or Homes Within Reach. So this would have two program partners. One is LISC, and LISC's role would be to select a developer through an application process, and the developers would be small with gross receipts or gross developer fees not exceeding $250,000 annually. They would connect developers to mentors who are seasoned in the industry, and they would serve as our fiscal agent. Homes Within Reach would help with the buying criteria of the homes of those 48 folks that have called us and said they want to sell their home into a program. It would help designing which homes would be really good for this program. It would help select the end buyers, and they would maintain ownership of the land. So who's LISC? We haven't had a partnership with them before. The mission statement is, with residents and partners, LISC forces resilient and inclusive communities of opportunity across America. It's a national organization with a local arm. To create great places to live, work, visit, do business, and raise families. I'm not going to read all this, but LISC, as I said, is a national corporation with a presence in the Twin Cities. They're focused on building collaborations, developing leadership, equipping talent to underserved communities, investing in business, building alliances, and they are involved with helping to form local, regional, national policy. Locally, the director is a former state representative and county commissioner who has been a strong advocate for affordable housing. So when we were seeking to partner and grow a program, LISC was an obvious choice. Again, I'm not going to read this slide. It's in your packet. But it gives some understanding to the scope of what LISC engages in and why partnering with them makes sense to help increase the capacity of small developers to help Edina preserve our modest homes for affordable ownership. This partnership fits within their local and national wheelhouse, and they have skill sets and expertise that increases our capacity to fulfill our housing goals. Funded in part through the state of Minnesota, together with foundations and other sources, LISC has a program to increase the capacity of developers of color. These developers must apply to be accepted and have demonstrated development experience. For the program in Edina, we'll utilize the training and support developers gained through the LISC program and open it up to a wider audience. We have not completed a disparity study in our city. So we cannot have a race-based program, but we can have one that will allow smaller, lower revenue-earning developers to work in the city. And so the application will be open to any small developers, regardless of race. The developers in this pilot will benefit from the technical assistance offered by LISC and a cohort of seasoned developers, but be selected. They must demonstrate their ability to get a project done on time and on budget. How this program will work is LISC and HRA staff will publicize an application and allow about a month to respond. As LISC has direct experience in reviewing applications of developers, they'll review the first round with final approval from HRA staff. Once the developer is selected, they will sign a loan agreements for both HRA funds and LISC funds. LISC is bringing money to this. The developers will use criteria established by Homes Within Reach and money from LISC and HRA to purchase a home. I will help by contacting those 48 interested sellers to see if they're interested. They're still interested. Their houses are still in the market. They still want to participate. Some of those homes have been sold to developers. The developer will rehab the home to meet health, safety, and code requirements. Upon completion, they'll convey the house to Homes Within Reach and get their developer fee. Homes Within Reach will place the land in a land trust and sell to an eligible home buyer. When the house is sold, LISC will be repaid, and the HRA loan will be attributed to the land to keep the home affordable for 99 years and then be forgiven. So there's 4 main parties. I'm not going to go through this because I think I described it already, but the HRA, LISC, the developer, and then Homes Within Reach. So for this pilot, I'm requesting $1.2 million. An authorization to engage the city attorney to prepare the loan documents. The HRA funds would come from the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, which will have over $2.6 million after your consent agenda item. And this program, there will be $2.6 million remaining. Our funds would be combined with funds from LISC to share the risk and to require less of an initial outlay from the HRA. The funds would be used for acquisition, rehab, soft costs, and fees for up to 4 homes. And as I said, I envision that the $1.2 million will be forgiven once the house is delivered to the land trust. We would enter into an agreement with LISC, who will administer and service the loans. LISC would manage the loan agreements with the developer. The developer would sign 2 sets of documents, one for the HRA funds and one other for their funds. The HRA loan would be forgiven once the land beneath the house is placed in the land trust. So there are policy considerations with this as well. Internally, we talk about how it's expensive to do single-family homes. It's a lot more expensive per unit than it is for rental. And so that is, a policy decision that's not necessarily mine to make, not at all mine to make. So the policy objectives are affordability, which single-family, this program is 99 years. Multifamily rental is 20 to 40 years. 40 years is when it's a tax credit project. 20 years if it's an inclusionary housing policy. The per unit funding gap for a single family is like $200,000 to $300,000 per unit. So that is between $2,000 and $3,000 per year because if it's a 99-year affordability period. And I did not do present time. This is just a very simple math equation. Where multifamily is about $30,000 to $65,000 per unit funding gap, and so it's less per year, even with the shorter time period. The income served for single family is about $50 to $125 with our various programs. Multifamily rental is about less than 30 to 60% of area median income. Housing stability, both create housing stability. Both put shelter over people's heads that need housing. One of the benefits of single-family ownership has is generational wealth. People, that is one of the great things in our society is people want to build home or have homes to build equity. And home ownership allows for that. Rental does not. And it also has housing for larger households. Most of the rental is efficiencies 1 and 2 bedrooms. Most of the single-family homes are 3 and 4 bedrooms. So the guiding documents to support this program is the comprehensive plan, as mentioned, the race and equity report, council's equity statement, and the council's statement on engagement. I feel I'll support moving forward with this program. And I'm here for questions.
Questions for Manager Hawkinson? Commissioner Anderson.
Yep. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I just wanted to ask some specific questions about how we're doing so far. I know that 7 have been purchased and 5 are in play, but I don't really have any background at all on the details of how that's operating within the scope of each purchase or their financing or title work or whatever. And so I just want to ask some specific questions about that. Roughly, these are all selling for $400,000, $450,000 in that area.
Chair, Commissioners, the homes are being acquired for between about $315,000 and $420,000.
Okay.
They are being sold to the end buyer because it is a land trust home for about $215,000.
Okay.
Because about half of it is being placed, the value is being placed into the land.
So what piques my interest is just, is this a land lease with homes within reach?
Chair Commissioners, yes, it is. So Homes Within Reach, if you look on Hennepin County sites, they are the owner of the land. They lease it to the homeowner. So I can't recall, and Brenda, unfortunately, I was unable to make it this morning. It's application season for them. They lease it for a dollar amount. So they have access to land. They can grow a garden. They are responsible for mowing and all that, but they don't own it. So, and then when they go to sell the home, they sell it and they can only earn 35% of the increase in equity. So it gets increasingly affordable over time. And it's the increase in equity is based on the value of the house. So they may have bought the house for $215,000. It may be valued at $300,000, but they only get to keep $35,000 of that $300,000. Or if it increases in value by $100,000, they only get to keep 35% of that. So over time, the home can reach deeper and deeper affordability, and they can put that restriction on the resale value because they own the land. It's part of the land lease arrangement.
So then how are they financed? Who's the financing agency? How does that occur for the homeowner, for instance?
For the homeowner, Chair Commissioners, they have to qualify for a mortgage. I mean, they go and they use whatever mortgage company, Alaris, Bell Bank, Wells Fargo, whoever they choose, but they have to qualify for a $215,000 mortgage rather than a $450,000 mortgage because of the land split. And so they pay mortgage payments to their first mortgage lender.
Sorry to interrupt you.
Sorry,
So of the 5 sales that we have, the homeowners have closed on those, and they haven't had any difficulty getting mortgage financing with the land lease issue.
Not at all.
Okay.
The land trust model is in Minneapolis, St. Paul, and 13 other suburban communities around here. So it's a pretty well-known model, and so there are a lot of lenders that they understand it. Okay,
good. That's good. And then the title work is just done conventionally by the title company that the lender. Okay, good. And the home equity is determined by 35% of the equity that would be gained during the holding period. The affordable housing aspect, it doesn't really fall into, I guess, the single-family affordable housing guidelines. You have a formula going in, and we work within that formula, correct?
Chair Commissioner, it does in the sense that the homeowners have to income qualify. They have to qualify for a mortgage, but they cannot have an income that exceeds 80% of area median income. Because Homes Within Reach gets money, in addition from us, they also get money from Hennepin County and the state. And some of the funds that they get are community development block grant funds. And so there are federal restrictions on the end user of those funds.
Okay, thank you. Okay. We've got 99 years of affordability structured into the purchase itself initially. And there's also some discussion in your presentation about rebuilding if necessary, even in the acquisition cycle, but ultimately, 99 years, my working assumption is that virtually all of the properties that are being acquired for redevelopment are 50 to 60 years old, virtually all of them. So over 99 years, they would virtually all have to be rebuilt. That's a working assumption.
Chair Commissioners, I think that is a fair assumption. What the rehab now, it is not turnkey. So the scope of work would be all mechanical systems have to make sure that there is a 15 to 20-year life. So when a moderately incomed household moves in, they're not moving into something that's going to suck all their money, remaining resources. We want to position them for success. So often they'll have new windows, new HVAC systems or boilers. They'll have new roofs. Next time, I would love to bring you through one. I walked through the Monroe that recently sold to an end buyer, and it was beautiful. I mean, they pretty much had a new kitchen, new flooring, so they really set them up for success.
They're solid properties when they're completed.
Yep.
Okay, good. That's what I have. I did research the Local Initiative Support Corporation. It's a good outfit. They're doing good work, and not only here in Duluth, especially in recent history, and nationwide. It's a good outfit. Okay, good. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Commissioner. Commissioner Pierce.
I did not have a question. I've been talking quite a bit with Director Hawkinson, but I did want to make a comment. I think we have to reframe how we talk about this issue. And this is not just an Edina challenge. I think all cities go through that initial needle point of BIPOC. And every presentation I've seen shows the disparities in income. And all those things are certainly true. But not everybody in those communities believes that it's the job of government to solve that challenge. And so that becomes one of the barriers we have to kind of work through. And I don't judge one way or the other. I think every individual that votes on an issue has a point of view, and it's America. Everybody has a right to that point of view. But when some of those points of view kind of challenge us to make progress, I think we have to have a more complex frame so that we can understand and accept that point of view, but then point to a different frame that is actually encompassing in all of that. And so one of the things that I think we really should be talking about is the simple fact that if we stay on the track that we're on, we're going to continue to compress our housing market. And that may not happen to impact the folks in this room for 10 years. That could be 15 years from now. But eventually, if things continue, it's going to be a challenge. And so one of the things that I use as an example, you buy a home for $500,000, whether you tear it down or you do a renovation, just pick an address in Edina. Within 7 to 8 months, a home that was $450,000 to $500,000 could now be $1.5 million. And you're talking 8 months, 12 months, right, on the outset of a build cycle. And so that house is now 43% more expensive than that address was before. And we can't continue with those dynamics because the market will continue to inflate from a housing perspective. Historically, you're probably expecting 5 to 7% value increase, right? If you follow the trajectory of you buy a home, you do a little renovation, maybe you add a room here, you replace the roof, your property value increases, and it typically will follow the market, right? But a 43% increase in 8 to 9 months, and we cannot continue on that trajectory. So to those we've gotten great feedback from the community on both sides, right? Different points of view. We do have to solve that challenge. And what I would say, the way that we're doing it today, I don't necessarily believe that it actually is sustainable, that we can continue to put money into these programs without finding a more sustainable way to fund them. And so I just wanted to make that comment, and I am urging people, I use this analogy at work. If there's I'll use my cup. Here's a cup of Starbucks. I can't see the other side of this. But if we go arm in arm and we walk around it, you can see and appreciate all points of view. We got to do that in order to solve this challenge. I think what we have in place today is making a good effort at that, and we're making some progress. But we definitely have to find a more sustainable way to continually fund a different housing model so that we have affordable options across the entire life cycle. Because at some point, we're all going to need affordable options across the entire life cycle. But you may not see that today. It might take 10 to 15 years, like I said before. So I'm 100% in on these types of options, but I'm also 150% in to try to figure out a more sustainable way for these approaches. So,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for those comments. Commissioner Jackson.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. So I have a couple of questions about the LISC program. The first question I have is when you're working with people who are new in a business or starting up these smaller developers, who holds the risk for their success? Is there a bondholder, or how do we ensure that as these people go forward, they're learning and growing, but that who bears the risk of their failure?
Thank you, Chair and Commissioner. Hi, Gretchen Nichols from the Local Initiative Support Corporation, or LISC. We have begun some very intentional work to help broaden the bench of people in this real estate development industry. We know that we need more types of players who respond to different community needs and have different understandings of different markets. So we designed this program really with the lens of what the challenges and obstacles that they are experiencing. And that has regarded equity, that they often do not have the resources that other more established developers have, professional networks and opportunities to interface with people who are more knowledgeable in the field, and providing the consultants and technical supports that they are missing in their models and programs. So we do a wraparound set of supports that help them on all of those levels. Not only that, but just the interactiveness and learning from each other and getting an understanding. I mean, the learning curve is just exponential in this program because they come in with a certain level of knowledge of even what they don't know what they don't know. And so what we're doing is exposing them to a lot of information and knowledge that they just really excel in advancing their programs. So we feel this is a really solid base. We have a lot of, LISC has very solid connections to the finance industry and players, and we can help navigate and advocate for them along the way. With this program in particular, we will be enhancing it with inspectors, consultants, people that help owners' reps to help them really assess the properties and understand what they need to be doing on the property. We'll be walking along with them the whole way. And so we want to assure you that we will do everything within our power to make sure you get a solid project and product at the end of the day. And to Commissioner Pierce's points too, the preservation of your existing housing is so imperative right now because the cost of building new is growing, and it's growing faster than we can keep up to. So the impulse to preserve what you have is right on point, and we really feel like we can be a solid partner with you in that work.
Okay. Well, thank you. That's a good lead into my second question. Stay here. Tell me precisely what these developers will be doing, because when we look at the developers who are existing in our community, we know they come in, tear down a house, and build a new one. What will the LISC developers be doing on a property?
So emerging developers means that they just don't have the track record or the depth of experience. So they're newer in the industry. So we will be walking along again with them to say, here's how you need to do this. This is what you need to consider, and supporting them in their projects. So we'll be sure that they are activating the redevelopment, the rehab of the projects sufficiently, and again, having inspectors and people who are watching along the projects. So it's essentially to help them have an additional experience in this industry that will give them more knowledge for their next projects. So.
Right. I think I didn't word my question properly.
Oh, sorry.
Will they be doing a tear down, or will they be doing a renovation?
There will be a renovation.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. That's all right. Thank you very much. All right. I don't know, should I go straight into comments then? Are we, or do you have questions?
Although I'm going to,
All right.
Commissioner Pierce had some, but I had a couple questions for
Okay, I'll hold off then, thank
Director
you.
Hawkinson, but you could do it either way. Okay. This little bit of a segue from Commissioner Jackson's, if you go to that slide 19, and this goes to that process issue that she was just talking about. I'm just trying to understand this better. And this also relates to what Commissioner Pierce was talking about. So you're here asking for 1.2 million because at one point in time we said, gee, we'd like to see more people own a home in Edina and not just rent. But you can clearly see from the data that you supplied, we're getting a lot bigger bang for our buck on rental than we are on homeownership. And this is gonna be a responsibility that continues on. So we've got government involved as a funder, and we've got private developers, like folks that are here this morning as funders, because they have to buy into the program or provide it in their multifamily buildings. And so to this whole sustainability issue, I'm just wondering, how are we going to make this work over time? We've got more money coming from the, let's say, the 70th in France project, and we'll have money coming into that affordable housing fund. And here you're asking for a drawdown. It still leaves us with a pretty good amount of money in there. I think you said 2.6 million. So if we look at that slide 19, so we're sitting, let's say we're sitting here with a theoretical 1.2 million. And then who makes the draw request to you? HR or the HRA?
Chair Commissioners, some of the details I'm still working out with legal. I didn't want to dive too deeply into the contracts that we have with LISC and what the contracts will look like with the developer, because I wanted approval before we started accruing fees, legal fees, and to get their input. How I envision it is, since LISC has vast experience in entering into loans with third parties, that LISC would be making the draw request, that they would have, the developer would work with them, they would find a home, they would enter into a purchase agreement, a draw would be created. We would process the draw to get to LISC that would go, so they would be the fiscal, I envision they would be the fiscal agent. Then the scope of work would be drafted of how much it's going to cost to rehab. And during that process, draws will be made from our funds to go to the developer to pay for their work.
So it's for the work, not for the acquisition of the property. So
Well, at the beginning for the acquisition of the property. So that I envisioned two draws. That's what's happening with Homes Within Reach now. There'd be a draw for the property and a draw for the rehab work.
okay. So if they find a piece of property, we've got $1.2 million in the fund theoretically. They need $400,000 to buy the property. Is that the kind of draw request that you're thinking about? Now they come back and they say the house needs $200,000 worth of rehabilitation. They make another draw request from us on that 1.2 million, which is now down to 800.
Chair, Commissioners, this is part of the detail that we need to work out. Is LISC is also bringing money to the table, so some of the funds will be drawn from their sources. So at the end of the day, our portion would be what is in the land, the value of the land, and that's where the 1.2 comes from. So some of the money for the construction and acquisition would also be coming from LISC. And so how we divide that up as we move along, we still are trying to figure out those details.
Okay. So your goal is to use that 1.2 to be able to do 4 homes, but that may or may not happen. I mean, you may need to burn up $600,000 of it on one purchase. You don't know yet. You don't know yet. You've got your own
I don't anticipate that would happen because part of the, when they purchase a home, part of the consideration is how much the rehab is going to be. So when they walk through a home with Homes Within Reach, they also are working on developing a scope before they do the purchase. So if the purchase, Homes Within Reach, for example, did visit a home. From the initial description, seemed like a perfect applicant for their current program, but then they got in and the foundation was crumbling. And they passed it. They're like, the cost to rehab this plus the cost to purchase far exceeds any reasonable amount, far exceeds $500,000. So we kind of have $500,000 as purchase rehab combined and fees combined as a gray fuzzy line to aim for. So when we sell the home for $200,000, we know $200,000 or $220,000 can be used to pay back a portion of what the outlay, and that the remainder stays with the project. So with $1.2 million, when I say it's 4 homes, I mean that's $300,000 per home that would stay in the land. So if the home sells for $200,000, we think purchase and rehab and fees wouldn't exceed $500,000. But we don't have that as a solid number for each home, because some homes they might buy in the low threes that are in pretty decent shape or need $100,000, and some they may buy in like close to the $425,000, and it may be turnkey. So with maybe a touch up of paint. And so roughly about $500,000 per home.
So let's use your 500 per home idea, and let's say that it takes $250,000 to get it in the shape you want to sell it, and somebody buys it for $250,000. Do we get any of that $250,000 back that they're paying to buy the house, or does that all go to Walt and Lisk?
Chair Commissioner, the money that goes to Walt is $5,000 per home. And the money that would go to Lisk is approximately $10,000 per home. And so those are set fees. The money that gets returned would be Lisk's loan. The money that stays in the property, the value that stays in the property is what the HRA contribution would be. If the HRA contribution exceeds the value that is staying in the home, we would get that difference once the fees are paid. So if a home buyer bought a home for the standard is around $220,000, of that $5,000 goes to Walt based on history. And so the homeowner, the mortgage is $220,000, Walt gets $5,000, then $215,000 is based on the home. And so if the home, the gap, the total cost of that project were $400,000, minus that $220,000 is $180,000, so that $180,000 gets it stays in the land. That $220,000, $5,000 goes to Lisk, the $215,000 comes back to the city, and how the program is operated now. How we envision that this program would be that of a $220,000 sales price, $5,000 would go to Homes Within Reach or Walt, and $215,000 would go back to pay off the Lisk loan. So they would have that amount in, but they would not profit from it. So if there's any residual, and if our gap or our amount of money in is greater than the land value, would get that difference back. Does that make sense?
Yeah, well, in the way you started to explain it, I was thinking we were in there twice. We were making a double contribution. We're contributing, we're buying the property, we're making it possible for the property to be purchased, and then the value of the land gets backed out, but we've already included that in the purchase price of the property, and then we're going to get back a piece of it if the value of the property is in excess of the land value, minus what goes to Lisk and Walt.
There may be some rolling funds. The 4 homes will probably not occur all at once. So the money that stays in the deal, that 1.2 that stays and does not get returned to us, is the value of the land. We may have more up front than the value of the land to be able for acquisition and rehab, but then we would get that back.
Okay.
And then
That's
that would
helpful.
be rolled into the next purchase.
All right. So it seems to me, as we've been going along here, to Commissioner Pierce's point about making a really good effort. And all possible because of the affordable housing policy that we have. It almost seems to me like we should be at the point where we should be requesting you to do an analysis of what's the best way we can meet our obligations from an affordable housing standpoint that has been requested of us by the Met Council. I mean, every town faces this issue. Every town, every city in the world faces this issue. And it strikes me that we want to get the best bang for the buck and also think about home ownership as a wonderful sort of thing to help build equity. So it's not an easy pathway to figure out, and we're doing the best we can. But at some point in time, I would think it would be incumbent upon us to think about, well, how do we? What's the smartest thing for us to do? I don't know. Commissioner
Chair.
Jackson?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, part of the problem, and when we did the community survey last time, we tried to I recommended that we disambiguate the meaning of the word affordable housing. Because when I was running for office, everybody said, we want more affordable housing. But when you tease it down, everybody has a different definition of what affordable housing is. And I probably had the most intense conversations with people all across the city about what that means. And the Met Council asks us for rental units. And that's what our goal is, if I'm correct.
It's a combination of rental and ownership.
Okay. A lot of people view affordable housing as small homes, small single-family homes that are disappearing. And they don't think about rentals at all. And so when people say, I want to preserve or I want to produce affordable housing, that means different things with everybody. And the people who are passionate about saying, I live in a small home, I couldn't afford to live in Edina now, where I was when I bought my house, there's no way I could be here now. And the Edina that I love is disappearing. And so we had some really heated conversations about, well, how do we do that? The market is in favor of tearing down these small homes and building big ones. And so we're fighting market forces. And Mr. Chair, I think that's what you're talking about. Every city is facing this because market forces are very much against these small single-family homes, and it is tremendously inefficient. But it's also a part of who we are. And so it's a value statement to say that we in Edina want a variety of houses for people to live in. And we as a government are willing to use governmental funds to preserve that variety of housing. And it's not efficient, and it's really complicated, and you've put a lot of brain power into this and creativity, and I'm very thankful for that. This is something that I support because the people I talk to in Edina also support this. And you've put together several policy reasons that we do that, but that was my experience in talking to people, that this is precisely what we want to do, and that we want to have the rental units and we want to have different levels of affordability, but preserving these small homes is a really deep value in our community. So with that, I'm in favor of this program.
Yeah, I am as well. I'm just thinking, so these are somewhat off-the-cuff thoughts, but
Chair,
it
Commissioners,
does strike me when I look at your presentation that there's a lot to think about.
and I'm more than happy to put together a policy brief. I would like to say that years ago when I worked in St. Paul, they had Housing 5,000, where their goal was to create 5,000 units of new housing because they knew there was housing. But from a dollar and cents perspective, what happened was they built a lot of one-bedrooms, and they built a lot of efficiencies to get to a goal number. And I would, caution that there are a variety of household types, and they don't all fit into efficiency in one-bedroom rentals that are the most cost-efficient per unit, to piggyback on what Commissioner Jackson said. And so the most cost-efficient may not, and this is what you were applying, I know that, but I just want to say that whatever I would come forward would not be the most cost-efficient because it would not meet all the housing needs that I think there are out there.
I just want us to have our eyes wide open, and I think Commissioner Jackson said it well. that we've made a determination that we want a variety of housing here. But, you know, when you just described a few minutes ago the amount of money that LISC makes on a project or the amount of money that Walt makes on a project, it just further emphasizes the complications of this sort of endeavor to try to create housing affordability, not only in our town, but anywhere. I hear mayors across the country and particularly across our state voicing these same concerns. It doesn't matter if you're in a metro or in a rural area. They don't have housing affordability. And so work like yours is really important, and we are really, as Commissioner Jackson says, deeply appreciative of having you here and helping us be more imaginative about the things that we can do around this important issue. So, yes, Gretchen, come on up. Ms. Nichols.
Thank you,
go
Mr.
ahead.
Chair. I just wanted to reiterate, as a pilot, we are very excited about collaborating with the City of Edina and exploring different financing strategies, how to make these resources go further and get to more of the goals that you're trying to meet. So we see this as an opportunity to really lean in with you, with our national expertise and finance expertise as well. So we appreciate what you're saying, and we want to help make these programs get more for you than this. And so it's a pilot, so we'd like to learn with you along this journey.
Okay. Yeah, that's a good observation that this is a pilot. Okay. Good. Manager Hawkinson's been very effective at creating some pilots for us. All right, good discussion, folks. Is there a motion to approve $1.2 million in forgivable loan amount for the Emerging Developer Housing Preservation Pilot Program and Pilot Program in partnership with LISC?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Jackson, second by Commissioner Pierce to adopt the motion as stated. Any further discussion? All those in favor of adopting the motion as stated, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Carried. Thank you. And we have one more matter before us this morning, and this, I think, is a kind of a belt and suspenders approach to the TIF matters that were approved at the City Council at our last meeting. But I'll let Manager Neuendorf give us the clarification on that.
Yes, good morning. This last item on the agenda this morning is the final step in the request and proposal to use tax increment financing on the project at 7001 France Avenue. This is the U.S. Bank site that's currently under redevelopment. The first phase, the new bank, is actively under construction. There's a great number of documents in the packet. As City Council, you've seen those last week as well. So I just wanted to walk through this very briefly, but of course we're here, happy to answer any questions. The packet contains 2 redevelopment agreements, and it's structured this way to address the budget gap that exists in the multi-phase project. Phase 1 consists of clearing the site, building the new roads, the new public infrastructure, and the residential tower. That's that's also addressed in the Site A TIF agreement. The second phase is the office building and the parking structure that serves that, and it's also a public parking structure. That's addressed in the Site B, Site C agreement. Collectively, there's about a $22 million budget gap to deliver this project. In the past, we've talked about how we've determined that. We've had input from Ellers and others to make sure that that's the right number. And over the last several months, we've negotiated terms of how the city could get involved to make sure that some of the public goals in the Southdale design guidelines are achieved in this project. We moved forward and created the TIF district back in March of this year, and then have these redevelopment agreements prepared. just run through a couple quick things here. We're still working with Mortensen and Orion Investments. At this point in time, Mortensen is taking the lead on the project, and Orion Investments intends to take the lead on the phase 2, on the office phase. The primary reason that we've even entered into this discussion to use tax increment financing on this project is really to achieve those goals in the Southdale design guidelines and our comprehensive plan. This is the first project that would go down the path of transformational change in this district, to convert a 6-acre parcel that was designed to be accessed by car and car alone, with 2 buildings surrounded by a sea of surface parking, to transform that into 4 pads crisscrossed by interior roads. That really is the first step in making that change, that transformation. And by having this combination of interior roads, we hope to not only create a better feel for that part of the community, but also to relieve traffic from France Avenue. Right now, when you exit the site, you have one choice: get on France Avenue. When we split up the site into smaller parcels, there'll be 3 other options. And again, this is the first step. In the future, we'll have other roads that would connect to it. Those would happen in the future. But in order to get this first step off the ground, of course, staff has recommended that we do use tax increment financing here. Let's see, run through a couple other things. The public benefits that we achieve in this are not only the growth of the tax base. We've talked about that quite a bit over the last several months. It's not just a simple increase in the tax base, but it's actually an increase by about a factor of 12. So that's a massive improvement to the city's overall tax base, which helps the city, the schools, and the county when all the tax increment expires. There's also park dedication fees, contributions to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. That's from the fiscal perspective. But on site, we also have public benefits, and that's when we write the TIF agreements, that's what we really focus on. So many chapters in the TIF agreement really focus on those elements. Things like the structured parking, both the parking in Site A in the podium of the residential building. Some of that parking is for commercial and public use. And then the Site C is the multi-story parking structure. We'll have public use of the first floor pretty much at all times, and then access to the upper levels when it's not primarily needed for the office tenants. We need to make sure that the parking is available to serve the project, but also to serve the public. We think we've navigated a way to get there. There's also the public plaza, both interior to the site as well as along the France Avenue edge, to really achieve some of those goals in our design guidelines. This project is unique, as I've mentioned in the past, as far as some of the trade-offs that we've considered to make sure that the parking structure works for the office while also working for the public. And to that end, there's provisions in the agreement to address the question that's been posed on several occasions: do we need parking today? Do we need it tomorrow? And do we need it 50 years down the road? So there is a purchase option in this agreement where if at some point in the future that big parking structure is not needed for parking, the city can purchase it for $1. So that there's a lot of trade-offs and a lot of foresight. Some of the benefits will be tangible immediately upon completion: the trees, the sidewalks, the roads. But a lot of the other public benefits are options that really address what the future may look like. So that's a little bit unique, but that's a challenge that you posed to us, and I think we rose to that occasion. There's lots of information in the packet. I ran through it at City Council, but I think I'll leave it there, and happy to answer any questions. Jay Lindgren from Dorsey and Whitney is with us this morning. He's been integral over the last 18 or 20 some months of working through this. He wrote the term sheet and was integral in converting that into the 500+ page contracts. And then Ted Carlson with Orion Investments is with us. Dan Lesser and Nate Podratz with Mortensen Company are also with us this morning. Happy to answer any questions. But staff still recommends that we move forward and approve these 2 TIF agreements.
Thank you. Question for Randy. You weren't able to join us for the city council meeting where this was approved there at that level, but
Yes, it
I was
was.
thinking you may have some questions.
I do, and thank you for mentioning that. I was unable to attend last Tuesday, but at the most recent HRA meeting preceding this, I inquired about an appraisal on each site, A, B, and C, and I wonder if that appraisal exists at this time.
It does not.
I see.
Rather than an appraisal, we're looking at the actual purchase price. That's a known number that we have. So that's what we've used to bake into the redevelopment agreement, the actual numbers.
Okay, thank you. I was just looking for relative values on each site. And I asked that because we're able to potentially, at some point, acquire Site C for $1, but we don't have any similar arrangement on B, if I recall that correctly.
That's correct.
Then what if, because this question has come up, and I just wanted to define that a little bit more this morning, if B and C were never built, what are the city's options and position at that point?
Yeah, great question. That's also one of the many possibilities that we considered and explored, so thanks for bringing that up. There's a couple ways that would be addressed. If Site B and C were not to go forward in their current configuration, the developer would be required to, at a minimum, plant grass, put some shrubs, make it look presentable in the short term. That's at the minimum. But also inherent and included in this agreement, it's Exhibit N. The developer at this point in time is willing to put forward a temporary deed restriction or land use restriction to make sure that B and C will only be used for commercial purposes, and commercial purposes of a certain scale. Because if the 8-level, 7-level office building doesn't go forward, the HRA doesn't get very excited about having a replacement coming back in with a single-story drive-through or something that's very minimal. We didn't go through all the visioning to end up with something that's not going in the direction that we hope that area goes. So upon execution, those land use restrictions will be in effect. And also, if the current proposal does not go forward, the city also has the right to purchase the Site C, the parking site, in the next couple years. So I think that right expires in 2025 or 2028. I forgot the exact number. But the idea there is we wanted the city to have some degree of control while the TIF district was still relevant. There's a 5-year window of time where the city can use the tax revenue generated by the new residential building to pay for public elements and for public benefit. If the worst case scenario happens and the office building doesn't go, we wanted to make sure that if necessary, the city has the right to step in and make sure that something good does happen. We focused on Site C because Site B is really driven by the marketplace. The developer has they have millions of reasons why they should not just let that site languish. They have debt, they've got investors, they have responsibilities and obligations. And Site B is really the one where it has the most commercial potential. Site C is kind of interior, it's still a very good site. But we felt that if the city does need to get involved, let's get involved on that smaller scale piece. Let the France Avenue frontage stay in the private sector. So those are 3 ways that we address that what if. They were tough conversations because right now the development team at Mortensen and at Orion is focused on Plan A. the 7-story Class A office building. That's their sole focus. But we did want to make sure that we address, well, what if it doesn't work out? And I think we've achieved that.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions or comments from commissioners? Commissioner
Yes.
Jackson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I want to emphasize the reason we're using TIF is this is a lot of firsts. This is the first office building in over 20 years. This is the first use of the grid design from the Southdale guidelines and the new setbacks and the public plaza. And that's really important. And I've been looking around the Twin Cities area quite a bit, going to other cities, and there is nothing that looks like the Southdale guidelines that I can find. It's either a very much smaller setback or the traditional suburban setback. And so I'm just want to emphasize the importance that this is something new and it's a first. The second thing is a question that came up when we were negotiating this, and that is using TIF as something to stimulate other changes. What are you hearing about how this will change the Southdale area in terms of maybe other developments or valuations or anything that you're hearing about the effect on other properties?
Yes, thanks for the question. I think it's too early to give a full response to that. There's still a lot of interest in the greater Southdale area. The biggest challenge is finding properties that are available. So we know that the site just a few blocks south at 72nd is going to be transformed and changed, hopefully sooner than later. So I think as this proposal goes forward to use TIF on this project, kind of draws a line in the sand about what the city is willing to support and what's important to the city. The Galleria shopping center changed hands earlier this year. Does it influence that? It's too early to say. I don't think the Galleria is going to go away. But I think approving this agreement shows that the city of Edina is consistent in both our zoning and our willingness to step up and participate when it's absolutely essential. But I can't say that any of the neighboring properties are going to follow suit tomorrow. I've heard no conversation of that sort.
Okay, thank you. That's just something that I want to continue to listen for. So thank you. That's all I've got, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Jackson. Commissioner Pierce?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I made this comment on on every presentation, and so I'm going to keep doing that with this development. And I don't think Orion or Mortensen would agree with the statement I'm about to make, but establishing the TIF districts, that to me is like the easy money. Now, I don't think they would agree with that because there is a lot of work that goes into it. But I do want to make sure, and there's a question here as well. I know they've applied for, I believe, 3 grants. And so the question I have, if you subscribe to, we've established a TIF district, we've set the value, that's kind of there now, right? How do we make sure that we not only finish the applications on those 3 grants, but if a new opportunity comes up 45 days from now, that we then go apply for that grant as well? Because I want to, it would be awesome if we get to the point where this is not a $22 million TIF district, it's 17, because we've secured grants. So that's that statement, and then the question of how do we make sure we're continually going after additional funding to reduce the liability from a city standpoint.
Yes, thank you. I'm happy to address that. We address it by writing it into the contract. So early on, we have the conversation and we ask. Once we put it in the contract, it's a binding obligation. So far, we've applied for the grant from DEED, and we received that. That was awarded. So we're still working through some paperwork, but that's been behind us, and that will be helpful. We've applied for a Hennepin County grant, have not received a response yet. That's still in process. It usually takes several months. And we expect to apply for an LCDA grant from the Met Council this fall. That also is competitive. We think we'll score well, but you never know if you get it until you actually get it. But certainly if other grant programs are available, we would certainly look into those. But the way we enforce it is through the grant agreement, or I'm sorry, is through the TIF agreement, where I think it's like section 5.8, if I had to take a quick guess, that's usually where it is, that says that you shall apply for these grants, and we will work together to make sure that we apply.
Thank you. I continue to be impressed by the way that you put this into 2 phases, and we're getting so much of what we want, as Commissioner Jackson pointed out, in phase 1. In the note there is a $5 million note, but we're resetting what this whole area looks like in that first phase. And I thought it was good on the part of the developer to agree to that, but it was really superb work by you and Mr. Lindgren in making sure that we set the tone for what the Southdale District's going to look like in the future in that first phase. And there's really no risk to the city on that, or in phase 2 for that matter. So, is there a motion to approve the tax increment financing to redevelopment agreements for Site A and Site B/C located at 7001 France Avenue?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Got a motion by Commissioner Jackson, second by Commissioner Pierce to approve the tax increment financing redevelopment agreements for the Site A and Site B/C located at 7001 France Avenue. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed?
Nay.
Carried. All right. Thank you. Thanks, folks. HRA Commissioner comments. Commissioner Jackson, anything you want to comment on?
So this is a great discussion about affordable housing today. I don't know whether you've heard anything with the National Conference of Mayors or anything, but I think that we need to pursue some way to create condominiums and maybe how we convert apartment buildings to condominiums and look for opportunities to do that. I'm just thinking of all the different ownership options. That's one we really don't have. And I know to build them from scratch is very high risk and expensive, but I don't know what it's like to convert existing housing into condominium. But if that's something the city can be involved in, I would love to hear more about it. Those are my comments. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Commissioner Anderson.
Thank you. Just a quick response. It's easier to convert than it is to build. And the warranties are one of the things, the state-required warranties are one of the things that holds back condominium new construction. But the conversion process is not so daunting, so maybe we can see that. The only thing I want to mention is that we have some budget conversations coming up here soon. And I think we've made good decisions here this morning, by the way. But we did spend $1.7 million quickly. And so I'm looking down the road and I take a look around and I read the paper as well. And I think I just want to strike a small note of caution as we move forward in terms of, you know, we have a very high tax base and we can do a lot of things that other communities can't, and we want to do that. At the same time, everything has a limit. And so I'm just mentioning that at this point going forward. But so thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Commissioner Pierce.
Nothing from me, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
All right. And from the chair, just one comment that is not related to the work of the HRA, but is related to the 4th of July parade. And we have a first, and Commissioner Pierce wouldn't mention this, but we are going to have Commissioner Pierce and his daughter Olivia sing the Star Spangled Banner to kick off the parade on Monday morning at 9 o'clock. And so thanks for agreeing to do that and stepping out there, and hope your voice is all limbered up at 9 in the morning.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I would kind of flip the way you're saying that. I'd say Commissioner Pierce is singing with his daughter. But we're looking forward to it, and hopefully that day will be a grand day, and it'll be nice, and it'll be another great Edina 4th of July parade.
Well, we've heard her sing, and it would be hard to match those vocals. And Director Benarott has quickly raised her hand because she wants to say something about this.
Mayor Hovland, because I don't want anyone to miss the singing of the national anthem or the parade, I would just like to point out that the parade starts at 10 a.m., not 9 a.m.
9.
Though you may
Thank
be
you. We have
warming
to
up
be
your
here at
vocals
9.
at that time.
Yeah, thanks for that.
10 o'clock is when you want to tune in for that.
Well, maybe he'll be over here practicing at 9. All right, yeah, thanks for that. 10 o'clock. Everybody will be there long before that. I see somebody's already got their chairs out there. So, all right, our Executive Director, Scott Neal, is with us. Good to have you back home again.
It's good to be home again. Mr. Chair, members of the commission, I don't have anything to add other than to let you know how much we appreciate your support for the pilot program this morning and the continued initiative at 7001 France Avenue. Big projects for our city. We can't do them just by alone as staff, so we're happy to have your support for that. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Executive Director Neal. All right, anything further from folks? Did that cause anything else to come to people's mind? All right, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second. We've got a motion by Commissioner Anderson, second by Commissioner Pierce to adjourn the HRA meeting on this last day of June 2022. Any further discussion? All those in favor of adjournment say aye. Aye. Opposed? Carried. We stand adjourned.